Hi, folks. Welcome to Israel Explained. Netanyahu finally gave an interview edition. I watched Netanyahu's interview on Channel 14 so that you won't have to. It was his first interview in like 9 months, the first one since the war started. A little bit of a home crowd. Channel 14 is the Israeli Fox News. Someone even yelled at him, "What a man," as he came on. They asked him hardball questions like, how do you feel when people attack you and your family? And do you think it was the left wing protesters' fault that October 7th happened? Um, but there was also some material policy issues discussed. And I have to say, Netanyahu looked very healthy, very vigorous, very coherent, and very convincing. In those terms, his interview was a great success. But there was a huge contradiction between what Netanyahu said his policy goals were and what his actual policies are. So much so that I think we're seeing Netanyahu admit publicly that he can't win this war militarily and he's not going to look for a hostage deal. Despite all the appearances to the contrary, this was actually an admission of defeat. So why do I say that? So he gave some positive sound bites. He said, "We need to destroy the force that committed the slaughter against us," talking about Hamas, of course. He said he's committed to victory and we will win. About the hostages, he said, "I am not giving up on any hostages." And when asked how he's going to win the PR war in the world, he said Israel needs to win the war militarily and quickly. Of course, the contradiction between that and what's actually happening are quite significant. He was asked about plans after Rafah in Gaza, and he said, "The war isn't about to end, but the war in its higher level of intensity is about to end. We will continue to mow the lawn. We won't give up on that." So mowing the lawn is the previous Israeli policy before October 7th of keeping Hamas at a lower level of functioning than it's currently at. He also said he won't reach a deal to free all the hostages. He said he's willing to reach a deal to free some of the hostages and then renew the war. So that, of course, is completely unacceptable to Hamas. They've said that unless there are guarantees that the war is going to end, they're not going to reach any deal. So what he's saying is he's not going to put the military pressure on Hamas to change their mind about a war, about a hostage deal, and he's also not going to commit to release all the hostages. So that means Hamas will stay in power, Hamas will remain with the hostages, and most likely Sinwar will remain alive. That's what comes out of this policy. Mowing the lawn, as he put it, won't put enough pressure on Hamas to change their policy. As for the day after, he talked about the day after. He said he had a plan to work with the clans in Gaza, but the head of one of the clans that they were going to work with was assassinated by Hamas. By the way, he was beheaded, quite spectacular, in front of his people. And so he said that he's given up on that. He said there's some kind of vague idea that the IDF has and that he would follow it and allow it. But he said no Palestinian state and no PA. He also said no settlements, by the way, which was very good. Of course, on some level, the question of whether there'll be a day after plan or not is theoretical. Because if all Israel's going to do from now on is mow the lawn, it's not going to have a chance to put in a day after. But even if it does, if it's not going to go with the PA, it's not going to go with a military administration, it's not going to move towards a Palestinian state, it's unclear what possible day after that could be. So what Netanyahu is basically saying is no release of the hostages, no defeating Hamas militarily, no replacement for Hamas. It's an admission of defeat. Ultimately, all this operation is going to do, and Netanyahu is saying this publicly, is it's going to weaken Hamas. It's not going to destroy Hamas, and it's not going to replace Hamas, and it's not going to save the hostages. And that is a failure and an admission of failure. Now, I got some questions on the last video from John Price Sagi. He said, when will the Iron Beam be operative? Would it be a game changer against Hezbollah, or is it hyped? I'm seeing some credible reports there will be an operation in South Lebanon by August. Since there has been so much training, what will be the psychological numbers of casualties tolerable for Israeli society, both IDF and civilians? I don't see less than 2,000 deaths, mostly civilians. Okay, tough questions there. So the iron beam has some advantages over the dome system because it's better at shooting off, at shooting down missiles that come in from below the 70-kilometer range. But it has some problems. It's more impacted by weather. It can be overloaded, unlike the Iron Dome, which has a much better rapid fire capability. So it's best seen as something that complements the Iron Dome and lowers the number of missiles that will hit Israel. So the IDF is concerned that if Israel is saturated with rockets, a good number of them will come through. And that's why, as you said, there could be a high number of civilian dead in Israel. You're talking about the level that Israel will tolerate, and I don't think that Israel really has a full plan for that. I don't think there will be 2,000 Israeli civilian dead, to be honest. That sounds too high, but I don't think the operation will be measured when it will stop by the number of civilians killed. High number of civilians killed might actually be an impetus to deepen the operation in order to stop it from happening. So it might lead to a more determination on the IDF side to finish. The IDF isn't necessarily going to back off from civilian casualties. It will try to prevent more from occurring. He also asks, what do you and other analysts mean by limited operation in the north? Hezbollah doesn't want a total war and doesn't want it to last. So Israel has leverage. But even if they're pushed to the Litani and it's enforced, and that's a big if, what will stop Hezbollah from firing from the north of the Litani and forcing Israel to go even further? Yeah, so you're absolutely right. A limited operation would push Hezbollah to the Litani. It wouldn't stop all launches. It would, however, stop attacks from tanks and would stop the threat that some people are worried about of an invasion. But it wouldn't stop everything, and then Israel would have to go further. And that's why the operation in Lebanon is a quagmire waiting to happen. It's going to be a nightmare if it happens. It would best be avoided. Jose Roche finally asks, do you believe the 972 magazine report about Where's Daddy? So what Jose is asking me there about is a report that Israel early on in the war, up until the end of November, used a AI program that calculated when members of the family of a terrorist suspect were gathered in a certain area and used that in order to target Hamas terrorists. And that, of course, led to them being assassinated with their family members present. And so from what I'm hearing, that AI program, Lavender, it's called, was used in some cases of very hard to hit Hamas terrorists, and in some successful targeted assassinations against them. But it was judged that it caused too many civilian casualties and was therefore discontinued. I don't know if the 972 magazine, which is not very trustworthy, if all the details there are correct, but there was some use of that algorithm, and Israel deciding that there were too many casualties involved, discontinued it. Okay, so thank you so much for watching my video. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon at Shael Media. Consider listening to my history podcast, History of the Land of Israel podcast, and I will see you here next time.